Have you ever wondered what it's really like to be married to a narcissist? On the surface, it may look like the perfect love story, but behind closed doors, it feels like walking on eggshells, never knowing when the charm will turn into criticism or when affection will turn into control. Today, we're breaking down the hidden patterns of how a narcissistic husband truly treats his wife and why it's so important to recognize the signs. Here's the thing about a narcissistic husband. He doesn't love his wife, he loves control. In the beginning, he showers her with affection. The compliments, the gifts, the attention. It feels like a dream. But it's not love, it's bait. Because once he feels secure, that same charm turns into control. He decides where she goes, who she talks to, how she spends her time. And if she resists, he makes her feel guilty for it. That's emotional manipulation disguised as concern. Gaslighting becomes his favorite weapon. He'll deny what he said, twist what she remembers, and make her question her own mind. Over time, she stops trusting herself and starts depending on him exactly the way he wants it. Then comes the criticism, the insults slipped into jokes, the constant reminder that she's not enough, that everything is her fault. That's the devaluation stage, and the more she shrinks, the bigger he feels. He'll isolate her, not by locking doors, but by planting doubts. Your family doesn't really care about you. Your friends are jealous of us. Before long, she's alone, with only him as her source of validation. And his love, it's conditional. He gives it when she obeys. He withholds it when she doesn't. It's a reward system, not a relationship. But here's the cycle. After the damage, he'll throw in an apology, not because he's sorry, because he needs to reset the game. Hurt, deny, half apologize, play nice, and then repeat. That's not marriage. That's manipulation. And the scariest part, to the outside world, he looks charming, but to his wife, every day feels like survival. Recognize it. Call it what it is. Because healing starts the moment you stop believing his version of the story and start trusting your own. When a woman first meets a narcissistic man, the relationship rarely begins with warning signs. In fact, it often feels like she has stepped into a fairy tale. He doesn't just show interest, he drowns her in it. Every text is answered within seconds. Every phone call lasts for hours. Every meeting is filled with compliments that feel almost too good to be true. He doesn't just say she's beautiful. He says she's the most extraordinary woman he's ever met. He doesn't just admire her smile. He insists it lights up his entire world. And in those early days, it feels intoxicating. It feels like she has finally found someone who sees her, values her, and cherishes her in ways no one else ever has. That stage is what people call love bombing. Love bombing is not about love, it's about speed and intensity. A narcissistic husband to be will often push the relationship forward faster than what feels natural. Within weeks, he may already be talking about a future together, describing the house you'll live in, the trips you'll take, even how many kids you'll have. He will insist that you are soulmates, that fate brought you together, that you were made for each other. And the woman caught up in this whirlwind doesn't notice the subtle pressure behind it. Because while it looks like passion, what it really does is eliminate space for her to think critically or step back to evaluate the relationship. The more swept up she feels, the less she questions what's happening. Gifts play a big part in this phase. Lavish dinners, surprise flowers, expensive items, he creates the illusion that she's worth the world. But those gifts are not expressions of generosity. They are deposits into a bank he plans to control later. Every gift comes with an unspoken expectation, loyalty, compliance, gratitude. In his mind, he's buying leverage. She may not see it yet, but every grand gesture comes with invisible strings. Another element of love bombing is excessive communication. He wants constant access, good morning texts, good night calls, messages throughout the day reminding her that he's thinking about her. At first, this feels flattering. Who wouldn't want a partner so invested? But beneath that attention is monitoring. He is not just expressing affection, he is tracking her availability, her responsiveness, her willingness to put him first above everything else. And the moment she delays in answering, he might joke about her being too busy for him. That joke plants a seed of guilt. That guilt ensures she learns to prioritize him, even over her own needs. Compliments also serve a purpose. They aren't just about making her feel good, they're about creating dependency. If someone tells you over and over again that you are extraordinary, irreplaceable, the only one who truly matters, you begin to crave that validation. You begin to believe your worth is tied to how much they see in you. And once that dependence is formed, he knows he can shift gears later, because she'll already be hooked, already looking to him as the source of her confidence. Family and friends often notice the intensity of this early stage. They may raise eyebrows saying it feels rushed, that it's moving too quickly, that it seems too perfect. But she defends him. She insists no one has ever treated her this way before, no one has ever loved her so deeply. That's the genius of love bombing. It doesn't just blind the partner, it convinces her to dismiss the warnings of those around her. There's also the illusion of vulnerability. A narcissistic man might share a painful story from his past, a heartbreak, a moment of struggle. He frames himself as misunderstood, wounded, searching for the one person who will finally love him the way he deserves. And she, wanting to be that person, steps deeper into the role. She thinks she's healing him, when in reality, he's using her empathy as another tool to secure her loyalty. All of this, the speed, the gifts, the attention, the compliments, creates a high. Psychologists sometimes compare love bombing to an addiction. The dopamine rush of constant validation is overwhelming. She feels chosen, special, set apart from everyone else. And when someone is in that emotional high, they're not thinking about red flags. They're not asking hard questions. They're not slowing down. They're just living in the intensity of the moment, believing they've found something rare and magical. But behind that magic is a blueprint. A narcissistic husband doesn't love bomb by accident. He does it because it works. It secures attachment quickly. It makes his partner invested before she has the chance to recognize who he truly is. It ensures that when the love bombing fades, and it always does, she will fight to get it back. She will remember the man who once called her his everything and wonder what she did wrong to lose that version of him. And that is exactly the trap he wanted her in from the start. When the charm of the beginning starts to fade, the narcissistic husband doesn't reveal his true face all at once. Control doesn't come crashing down like a hammer. It slides in quietly, disguised as care, disguised as concern, disguised as leadership. At first, it feels like he's simply taking initiative, making decisions, looking out for his wife's best interests. But control is never about love or protection. It's about power, and with him, power becomes the center of the relationship. It starts in small ways. He might say something about what she's wearing, not directly insulting, but phrased as advice. That dress is nice, but this one makes you look even better. Or, you shouldn't wear too much makeup. I like you natural. To her, it sounds like preference. To him, it's the first step in dictating her choices. From clothes to hairstyle to the way she presents herself in public, his voice slowly becomes the one that matters most, until she begins to hesitate before picking out anything on her own. Control also shows up in decisions about where she spends her time. In the beginning, he encourages her to cancel plans with friends so they can be together more often. We don't get enough time with each other, he says, and it feels romantic at first. But later, that suggestion becomes an expectation. Friends get labeled as a bad influence, family members get criticized for not understanding him, and gradually she finds herself cut off from the people who once formed her support system. The less time she spends with others, the more dependent she becomes on him. Money is another tool. A narcissistic husband may insist on managing all the finances, even if his wife is capable of doing so herself. He frames it as responsibility. Don't worry about bills. I'll take care of everything. But what looks like generosity is actually control. If she doesn't know where the money is going, she can't make independent choices. If she doesn't have access to finances, she can't easily leave. Financial dominance is one of the most powerful chains in a toxic marriage, and he knows that conversations become another arena for control. He interrupts her when she speaks, dismisses her opinions, or reframes her ideas as his own. If she voices a need, he turns it into a weakness. If she has a boundary, he pushes past it. Over time, she learns to silence herself because speaking up only leads to arguments, criticism, or punishment. And the quieter she becomes, the louder his dominance feels. He also dictates emotions. If she is sad, he tells her she's overreacting. If she is angry, he calls her crazy. If she's excited about something that doesn't involve him, he minimizes it. Slowly, she starts doubting whether her feelings are valid at all. He trains her to believe that only his emotions matter, only his perspective counts, only his needs are worth serving. Another tactic he uses is monitoring. He may want to know where she is at all times, checking in constantly, questioning her when she takes too long to respond. At first, it comes across as worry, as though he cares deeply for her safety. But soon, it feels like surveillance. Every outing requires an explanation. Every delay is suspicious. Every independent move is treated as a potential betrayal. She begins to police herself before he ever has to say a word. Even the home becomes an environment of control. He decides how things should be done, whether it's how she cooks, how she cleans, or how she organizes. If she doesn't follow his standards, he criticizes or corrects her, sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes in outright anger. Home stops being a place of comfort and turns into a space where she has to perform. Always careful not to break the invisible rules he sets. Control also shows up in intimacy. He may decide when they're physically close, ignoring her consent or disregarding her lack of desire. Intimacy becomes less about connection and more about entitlement, another area where his dominance over her body and choices is reinforced. What makes his control especially damaging is that it's wrapped in manipulation. He doesn't say, "I'm controlling you." He says, "I just love you too much to lose you." He doesn't say, "I don't trust you." He says, "Other people don't deserve you the way I do." By twisting his control into declarations of love, he convinces her that submission is proof of devotion, that obedience is a sign of loyalty, that giving up her independence is the price of being cherished. And so, bit by bit, she stops recognizing herself. She no longer makes choices without considering his reaction. She no longer trusts her instincts without his approval. She no longer feels free in her own life because every part of it has been redirected through him. His dominance isn't just about controlling her actions, it's about reshaping her identity until she is no longer her own person, but a reflection of what he wants her to be. Emotional manipulation is one of the most powerful tools a narcissistic husband uses to keep control because it doesn't leave bruises on the skin, it leaves confusion in the mind. It works quietly, weaving itself into everyday conversations, everyday decisions, and everyday conflicts until his wife no longer knows if she's reacting naturally or if her emotions are being carefully steered. He doesn't scream, "I'm manipulating you." Instead, he uses tone, timing, and subtle words to twist situations so that he always comes out on top and she always ends up doubting herself. One of the most common tactics he uses is guilt. He learns very quickly what she cares about most, her sense of responsibility, her kindness, her desire to make people happy, and he flips those strengths against her. If she spends time with friends, he says, "I guess I'm just not important enough for you anymore." If she voices a complaint, he sighs and says, "After everything I do for you, this is how you treat me." If she sets a boundary, he plays the victim, "I guess nothing I do is ever good enough." Each of these lines digs in her conscience, making her feel as though she's the one failing the relationship, when in reality, he's the one pulling the strings. Then there's the silent treatment. When she upsets him or doesn't do what he wants, he withdraws completely. He stops speaking, stops looking at her, acts as though she doesn't exist. The silence isn't random, it's punishment. It teaches her that love and attention are conditional and that the only way to get back into his good graces is to apologize, to give in, to surrender her needs. For a woman who deeply cares about her marriage, that silence feels unbearable. So she compromises, she backtracks, she submits just to get him to talk to her again. Another layer of manipulation comes through exaggeration. He takes small mistakes and turns them into massive betrayals. If she forgets to do something, he frames it as proof that she doesn't care. If she says something the wrong way, he insists she's being disrespectful. He inflates every error so that it feels catastrophic, and in doing so, he keeps her in a constant state of walking on eggshells. She becomes overly cautious, terrified of disappointing him even in the smallest ways. He also knows how to flip blame. If she confronts him about something hurtful he's done, he redirects the spotlight back onto her. If she says, "You yelled at me," he replies, "I yelled because you pushed me to that point." If she says, "You lied," he says, "I had to lie because you overreact to everything." In this way, he makes himself the victim of her actions. Over time, she starts to believe that maybe she is the one causing the problems, maybe she is the one at fault, maybe she is the one who needs to change. That self-doubt is the very outcome he wants, because a woman who blames herself is easier to control. There is also the manipulation of emotions through affection. He knows how to withhold kindness when she needs it most, and he knows how to shower her with just enough warmth to pull her back when she's on the edge of leaving. It's not random, it's calculated. After a period of coldness or cruelty, he might suddenly bring flowers, plan a date, or speak tenderly just enough to remind her of the man she fell in love with. That inconsistency creates a powerful hook because she starts chasing the high of those rare moments of affection, believing if she just tries harder, she can bring back that side of him permanently. Emotional manipulation also extends into arguments. He might raise his voice, twist her words, or talk in circles until she's so exhausted she gives up. He may insist she's misunderstanding him, accuse her of being too sensitive, or claim that she's attacking him when all she did was express her feelings. The goal isn't resolution, the goal is confusion. The more tangled the conversation becomes, the less likely she is to challenge him again. Sometimes he manipulates by pretending to be fragile. He'll act hurt, wounded, broken, as though her actions have devastated him beyond repair. She ends up comforting him even when he's the one who caused the pain. He thrives on flipping roles, making her feel guilty for defending herself, making her apologize when she's the one who was mistreated. That role reversal keeps her locked in a cycle of taking care of him instead of holding him accountable. Over time, these patterns erode her sense of reality. She questions her memory of events, doubts her feelings, second guesses her decisions. She no longer trusts herself because every time she leans into her truth, he finds a way to twist it until it collapses. And in that collapse, he stands stronger because her uncertainty is the foundation of his control. Emotional manipulation doesn't need shouting or violence to be effective. All it needs is repetition until the wife begins to believe the story her husband feeds her instead of the truth she once knew inside. Gaslighting is one of the most destructive tactics a narcissistic husband uses because it doesn't just confuse his wife, it rewires the way she sees herself, the way she remembers events, the way she trusts her own mind. It's psychological warfare, and it works by planting seeds of doubt so deep that she can no longer tell if what she feels, hears, or remembers is real. At first, it happens so subtly that she doesn't even notice. A misplaced word, a denied statement, a shrug of dismissal. But slowly, those small denials grow into a pattern that eats away at her confidence in her own perception. It might begin with something simple. She remembers him promising to do something, but when she brings it up, he flatly denies ever saying it. "You're imagining things," he tells her with absolute certainty. Or she recalls a moment when he raised his voice, but when she confronts him, he laughs and says, "I never yelled at you, you're too sensitive." Over time, these small contradictions start to accumulate, and she begins to question whether her memory is reliable. That questioning is exactly what he wants, because the less she trusts herself, the more she will rely on him for the version of truth. Gaslighting thrives on confidence, and a narcissistic husband carries it effortlessly. He delivers his lies with a straight face, without hesitation, without the slightest flicker of doubt. When someone lies with complete conviction, it becomes harder for the other person to stand firm in their truth. She may replay the moment in her head, convinced she's right, but his unshakable certainty makes her wonder if she's wrong. That wonder, repeated enough times, turns into a habit of self-doubt. Sometimes he rewrites entire events. She recalls how a fight unfolded, how he insulted her, how he stormed out, but when the conversation comes up later, he retells it differently. In his version, she was the one who overreacted. She was the one who raised her voice. She was the one who turned nothing into something. He changes the order of events, flips the blame, and injects just enough confidence in his storytelling that she starts to believe maybe her memory was faulty. After all, how could two people remember the same moment so differently? And because she wants peace more than she wants to argue, she lets his version stand. He also uses gaslighting to minimize her feelings. If she says she's hurt, he says, "You're being dramatic." If she says she's upset, he says, "You always make a big deal out of nothing." If she says she's scared, he insists, "You're imagining problems that don't exist." In each case, the message is the same: her emotions are not valid, her experiences are not trustworthy, her perspective is flawed. Over time, she learns to keep her feelings to herself because every attempt to express them gets turned against her. Another layer of gaslighting comes when he accuses her of things she didn't do. He might claim she's forgetting responsibilities, misplacing items, or intentionally provoking him, even when none of that is true. These accusations force her into a defensive position where instead of questioning his behavior, she's too busy proving her innocence. And the more she tries to defend herself, the more guilty she feels, because defending against lies still plants the seed that maybe, just maybe, there's some truth to them. There are times when he'll outright deny reality in ways that feel absurd, but his insistence makes them believable. She may recall a hurtful phrase he used, but he insists he never said it. She may bring up a place they went together, but he says it never happened. The sheer confidence of his denials makes her start to think she's losing her grip. That's the cruel beauty of gaslighting. It doesn't just distort facts, it distorts her sense of self. She begins to wonder, am I going crazy? Is something wrong with me? That fear keeps her trapped because instead of seeing him as the source of the problem, she begins to see herself as broken. Gaslighting also works in cycles. After confusing her with lies and denials, he may suddenly switch gears, offering affection or reassurance. He'll tell her he loves her, that she's overthinking, that she just needs to relax. That comfort keeps her tethered because it softens the edges of doubt, making her believe maybe she really was just overreacting. This back and forth keeps her from fully waking up to the reality because each time she gets close to clarity, he pulls her back with false reassurance. What makes gaslighting especially dangerous is that it isolates her from her own mind. She no longer trusts her memory, no longer trusts her judgment, no longer trusts her feelings. And when a person can't trust themselves, they cling harder to the person who insists they hold the truth. That dependency is exactly the outcome he wants because it cements his power over her reality. The devaluation phase is the part of the relationship that feels the most jarring because it comes right after the intoxicating high of love bombing. One moment, the wife feels like the center of his universe, the person he can't live without, the one who completes his life. And then, almost overnight, the warmth starts to fade. The same man who once showered her with compliments begins to pick her apart. The very traits he once claimed to adore become the things he criticizes. At first, it feels confusing because she can't understand how someone who seemed so devoted could suddenly become so cold. But that's the trap of narcissistic relationships. The pedestal was never about admiration, it was about control. And once he feels she's securely attached, he no longer needs to maintain the illusion. In this stage, criticism becomes his main language. He notices her flaws constantly and points them out with precision. If she dresses up, he says she's trying too hard. If she doesn't, he says she's letting herself go. If she speaks her mind, he says she's too aggressive. If she stays quiet, he says she's boring. There's no winning, because the point isn't fairness, it's to chip away at her confidence until she feels small, unworthy, and dependent on his approval. The devaluation doesn't always come in the form of direct insults. Sometimes it's sarcasm, little jabs disguised as jokes. He might mock her in front of friends, brushing it off as playful teasing while she forces a smile to hide her embarrassment. Or he might compare her to other women, pointing out how someone else is prettier, smarter, or more successful. These comparisons sting deeply because they come from the very person who once made her feel like she was unmatched. The shift from being idealized to being belittled leaves her constantly trying to figure out what changed, what she did wrong, how she can get back to the way things used to be. Another hallmark of the devaluation phase is blame. Suddenly, everything becomes her fault. If he's angry, it's because she provoked him. If he cheats, it's because she wasn't giving him enough attention. If he lies, it's because she would have overreacted to the truth. He twists every problem back onto her shoulders, leaving her burdened with guilt and responsibility that doesn't belong to her. Over time, she begins to accept that narrative, apologizing for things she didn't cause, trying harder to fix things she didn't break. Emotional neglect also plays a role. The affection and attention that once flowed freely becomes scarce. He withdraws kindness, withholds intimacy, and makes her feel invisible. When she asks what's wrong, he dismisses her as needy or clingy. This starvation of affection makes her crave his approval even more, because she remembers what it felt like to be loved by him in the beginning. She keeps chasing that version of him, believing if she can just do everything right, he'll come back to her the way he once was. During this phase, the narcissistic husband often rewrites history. He acts as though the love bombing stage never happened, as though he never said the words that made her feel cherished. When she brings up those moments, he denies them or mocks her for being naive enough to believe them. This rewriting deepens her confusion because she's left wondering if she imagined the entire relationship, if she exaggerated the good times, if the love she felt was even real. Sometimes he escalates the devaluation by seeking admiration elsewhere. He might flirt openly with other women, spend time away from home, or create emotional connections outside the marriage. He does this not just for his own ego, but to reinforce her sense of inadequacy. By showing her that his attention can easily shift, he makes her feel replaceable, and that fear of abandonment makes her cling tighter. It's a cruel cycle. The more he devalues her, the harder she tries to win him back, and the harder she tries, the more power he gains. The wife often begins to internalize the criticism. She looks in the mirror and sees flaws she never noticed before, hears his voice in her head telling her she's not enough, feels his judgment even when he isn't in the room. This self-doubt bleeds into every area of her life, from her friendships to her work to her own sense of identity. The confident, independent person she once was starts to shrink, replaced by someone who is constantly second-guessing herself. What makes the devaluation stage so devastating is the contrast. If she had never experienced the intensity of the love-bombing phase, the criticism might not cut as deeply. But because she once felt adored, cherished, and idealized, the fall feels endless. She keeps reaching for the man he was in the beginning, not realizing that version was only ever a mask. And the more she tries to bring it back, the more he uses that effort as proof of his control. Isolation is one of the quietest but most effective tactics a narcissistic husband uses because it doesn't usually happen in a dramatic, obvious way. It isn't about locking doors or forbidding contact outright, at least not in the beginning. It works slowly through suggestions, criticisms, guilt trips, and carefully planted doubts until his wife looks around one day and realizes she's standing alone with no real support system left. At first, she doesn't even see it as isolation. She thinks she's making her own choices, choosing her husband over her friends, prioritizing her marriage over other commitments. But what she's really doing is stepping into the cage he's been quietly building around her. It might begin with casual comments about her friends. He'll say things like, I don't think she's a good influence on you, or why do you even hang out with them? They don't really care about you. It sounds like concern, as though he's just looking out for her. But beneath those words is a push for her to doubt the people she's always trusted. Maybe she brushes it off the first few times, but when the comments keep coming, she starts to wonder if he's right. The doubt grows, and before long, she's seeing her friends less and less, not because she wants to, but because it feels easier than listening to his constant criticism. Family becomes another target. He may complain about how they treat him, insisting they don't respect him or that they're too controlling. He might say, "Your family never liked me," or "They're jealous of what we have." By painting himself as the victim, he makes her feel like she has to choose sides. Out of loyalty, she chooses him, believing she's protecting her marriage. But what she's really doing is cutting ties with the very people who would have supported her when things got difficult. Isolation also shows up in how he monopolizes her time. At first, it feels romantic. He always wants to be with her. He insists that they spend all their free moments together. He makes her feel like she's the most important person in his world. But over time, that closeness turns into control. If she wants to make plans with others, he acts hurt. If she chooses to go out without him, he sulks, criticizes, or accuses her of not valuing their relationship. The guilt becomes so heavy that she stops making plans at all, staying home to keep the peace. Technology becomes another tool for isolation. He may constantly check her phone, question who she's texting, or demand to know why she's on social media. He might accuse her of hiding things when she wants privacy, or claim that other men are after her if she posts pictures online. These accusations feel exhausting, and eventually she pulls back from digital connections just to avoid the conflict. Her world grows smaller, limited to the relationship, and that's exactly what he wants. Isolation can even extend into her professional life. He may discourage her from pursuing a career, insisting that he'll take care of her financially. making it sound like a gift when in reality it's another form of control. If she does work, he might complain about the hours, criticize her coworkers, or demand so much of her attention at home that it becomes impossible to balance both. Slowly, she may step away from her ambitions, leaving her financially and socially dependent on him. What makes this process so damaging is that it feels like choice. She believes she's choosing her husband, choosing her marriage, choosing love. She doesn't see that the choices are being shaped by manipulation. The husband frames it in ways that make her feel like she's doing the right thing, like she's being loyal, like she's being a good wife. So when she finally realizes how alone she is, it's not obvious to her that he engineered it. It feels like something she did herself. Once the isolation is in place, his control becomes stronger. Without friends to confide in, without family to support her, without independence in her work or finances, she has fewer places to turn when things get bad. She has no outside perspective reminding her what's normal and what's not. She only has him, his voice, his version of reality. That dependency is the foundation of his power, because as long as she has nowhere else to go, she has to keep coming back to him. Isolation doesn't always look like walls being built around her. Sometimes it looks like her friendships slowly fading away, her phone ringing less, family gatherings she doesn't attend anymore, career opportunities she no longer pursues, dreams she quietly lets go of. It looks like a shrinking life, piece by piece, until the only constant presence left is him. And by the time she notices, the circle has closed so tightly that breaking free feels impossible. Conditional love is one of the most painful realities in a relationship with a narcissistic husband, because it feels like love at times, but never consistently. It is given and taken like a prize, awarded when his wife behaves according to his rules, and withdrawn the moment she steps outside the lines he has drawn. What makes it so devastating is that it creates an unstable pattern. She never knows where she stands, never knows what version of him she will meet on any given day, and never knows what small action might trigger affection or rejection. The love becomes a currency, something she has to earn, rather than something freely given. And over time, it makes her desperate to perform for approval rather than feel secure in being herself. At the start, it might seem subtle. He may compliment her when she does something he wants, like cooking a meal the way he likes, wearing an outfit he prefers, or rearranging her schedule to match his. In those moments, he showers her with kindness, as though she's finally the partner he always wanted. But if she makes a choice for herself, even a small one, he shifts into coldness. He may ignore her, criticize her, or withhold affection altogether. The contrast between warmth and distance is so sharp that she starts adjusting her behavior just to keep him happy, just to keep the love coming, just to avoid the sting of rejection. This kind of conditional affection seeps into every area of the marriage. Physical intimacy becomes a bargaining chip. If she complies, he is affectionate. If she resists or voices discomfort, he turns cold, acts offended, or even punishes her with silence. Emotional closeness follows the same rule. If she praises him, supports him, puts his needs first, he rewards her with attention. But if she criticizes him, expresses her own needs, or sets a boundary, he pulls away. The pattern teaches her that her value is tied directly to how much she sacrifices herself for him. Over time, she starts living in a constant state of performance. She monitors her words, her actions, her tone of voice, all in an effort to stay on his good side. It feels less like a marriage and more like a stage where she's acting out the role of the perfect wife, because the moment she slips out of character, she risks losing his approval. This performance is exhausting, but she clings to it because the alternative, his cold indifference or anger, feels unbearable. What makes conditional love especially cruel is the way it mirrors addiction. The wife gets small doses of affection that feel so powerful, so rare, that she chases them endlessly. Those brief moments of tenderness, those glimpses of the man she once fell in love with, become proof to her that the relationship still has hope. She convinces herself that if she just tries harder, sacrifices more, or stays patient, she will get back to that loving version of him permanently. But that version only appears when it serves him, when it benefits him, when it reinforces his control. The husband knows exactly what he's doing. He doesn't give affection freely because free love doesn't create control. By attaching conditions, he makes sure that his wife's always striving, always adjusting, always focusing on pleasing him. He positions himself as the gatekeeper of love, deciding when it's granted and when it's withheld. That power gives him an unshakable sense of dominance because she becomes dependent not just on his presence, but on his approval for her emotional survival. Even in conflict, conditional love plays a role. After an argument, he may suddenly become affectionate again, but only after she apologizes, even if she wasn't at fault. The apology is her ticket back into his good graces, and once he gets it, he turns warm again, creating the illusion of resolution. But what really happened is that she learned once more that love is not unconditional. It is earned through submission. The emotional toll of conditional love runs deep. She begins to doubt her own worth, wondering why she can't simply be loved for who she is, wondering what's wrong with her that she has to work so hard just to keep affection alive. She compares herself to others, thinking maybe if she were more beautiful, more patient, more obedient, things would be different. In reality, there's nothing wrong with her. The flaw is in the system of control he has built. But by then, she's so entangled in the cycle that she can't see clearly. Conditional love also isolates her from herself. She stops expressing her true thoughts, her real feelings, her authentic desires, because every time she does, she risks rejection. Instead, she molds herself into what he wants, burying her identity under layers of compliance. The woman she once was begins to fade, replaced by someone who exists only to keep the peace and earn the crumbs of affection that he doles out. The cruelty of conditional love is that it dangles hope in front of her but never delivers it fully. It keeps her chasing, keeps her striving, keeps her stuck in a cycle where the reward is always temporary and the punishment is always near. And with each repetition, her sense of self weakens, while his control grows stronger. The cycle of abuse and apology is the loop that keeps a narcissistic marriage alive, the never-ending pattern that traps the wife into believing change is always just around the corner. Even though it never comes, it is not a random set of ups and downs. It is a carefully orchestrated cycle designed to break her down and then reel her back in again and again until she no longer knows how to escape. Each stage of the cycle feels different, but they are all connected, all part of the same script that plays on repeat, making her believe that the relationship is worth holding on to when in truth it is only wearing her down. It usually starts with tension building. He grows irritable, short-tempered, easily offended. Small things set him off, and she can feel the air getting heavier in the home, like she's walking on eggshells waiting for the explosion. She tries to keep things calm, tries to do everything right, but no matter how careful she is, the blow up eventually comes. The abuse might be verbal, yelling, insults, cruel sarcasm. It might be emotional, coldness, silence, manipulation. In some cases, it can even turn physical. No matter the form it takes, the point of this stage is to release his anger onto her, to reestablish his dominance, to remind her of his power. After the storm, the denial comes. He minimizes what happened, twists it around, or flat out refuses to acknowledge it. If she confronts him, he says she's exaggerating. If she cries, he tells her she's being dramatic. If she brings up the hurtful words he said, he claims he never said them. This denial is a crucial part of the cycle because it confuses her. She knows what she felt, she knows what she heard, but his certainty makes her question her own reality. She starts to wonder if she's making too big a deal out of it, if maybe she really did overreact. Once denial has weakened her stance, the half apology shows up. He may not say the words, "I'm sorry I hurt you." Instead, he says things like, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't pushed me." These apologies are hollow, but they sound close enough to remorse that she grabs onto them, hoping they mean something. Sometimes he'll add in a gift or a gesture like buying flowers, planning a nice dinner, or suddenly being affectionate after days of coldness. These gestures create the illusion of repair, even though no real accountability has taken place. Then comes the honeymoon phase. He's suddenly attentive, loving, the man she fell in love with at the beginning. He compliments her, spends time with her, makes her believe that maybe he has finally changed. For a little while, things feel good again. The contrast between the abuse and the affection is so sharp that the good moments feel even better than they actually are, almost intoxicating. She clings to them, convincing herself that this is proof of his love, proof that the relationship can be saved, proof that she was right to stay. But the cycle doesn't stop there. Once the honeymoon phase fades, tension begins to build again. The irritability returns. The criticism creeps back in. The eggshells reappear under her feet. She can sense it coming, but she feels powerless to stop it. And when the next explosion happens, she finds herself right back at the beginning of the loop. The more times this cycle repeats, the more trapped she feels, because every time she thinks things are improving, the ground falls out from under her again. The danger of this cycle is the false hope it creates. The apologies in the good phases are never genuine change, but they're just convincing enough to make her believe they are. She tells herself, this time is different. She excuses the past because of the brief moments of kindness in the present. She convinces herself that if she is more patient, more understanding, more forgiving, the cycle will finally end. But it never does. The cycle is not a mistake. It is the system itself. Psychologically, this roller coaster has a powerful effect. The alternating abuse and affection create a trauma bond where her brain starts to associate the pain with the reward. The temporary relief of the good moments feels like love, even though it's really just part of the manipulation. She starts craving his apologies, his tenderness, his temporary kindness in the same way an addict craves a fix. And just like addiction, the highs get shorter, the lows get longer, and the cost gets heavier over time. Friends and family looking in from the outside might wonder why she doesn't just leave. They see the cruelty, the manipulation, the abuse, and they can't understand why she stays. But from the inside, the cycle keeps her hooked. She's not holding on to the abuse. She's holding on to the apologies, the promises, the fleeting moments of love that follow. She believes that if she just endures the bad, she'll be rewarded with the good, not realizing that the good is only there to keep her locked in place. When you step back and look at the full picture of how a narcissistic husband treats his wife, you begin to see it's not just one behavior, not just one flaw, not just one mistake. It's a system of control, manipulation, and emotional erosion. It starts small, with the subtle gaslighting, the quiet withdrawal of affection, the way love feels more like a test than a gift. It grows into constant criticism, shifting blame, setting impossible standards, and making her feel like nothing she does will ever be enough. It builds walls around her, slowly cutting her off from her confidence, her independence, even from her own voice. The damage is not loud all the time. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it comes wrapped in a smile, in a gift, in an apology that feels close enough to real that she wants to believe it. That's what makes it so dangerous. The cruelty is hidden in the cycle, in the way moments of tenderness are used as a leash, keeping her tethered to a relationship that drains her more each day. The pattern is always the same: tear her down, then offer just enough affection to keep her standing. What's most heartbreaking is that the wife often forgets who she was before the cycle began. She questions her worth, she doubts her strength, she loses sight of her own reflection in the mirror of his demands. She learns to survive by shrinking, by bending, by molding herself into the shape he wants, until the woman she once was feels like a distant memory. And yet, beneath all of that, she still carries the hope that if she just tries harder, if she just gives more, he will finally love her the way she deserves. But love is not meant to be earned through fear. Love is not meant to be conditional or manipulative or cruel. A marriage is not supposed to feel like a battlefield where one person always wins and the other is left in pieces. Real love is steady. It builds rather than breaks. It gives rather than withholds. And when that kind of love is absent, no amount of apologies or promises can replace it. The truth is, no one deserves to live in a cycle of pain disguised as love. No one deserves to be silenced, doubted, or treated as less than. The cost of staying in that kind of relationship is not just the loss of peace, it is the slow loss of self. And the longer the cycle continues, the harder it becomes to remember that you are worthy of something better. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how a narcissistic husband treats his wife. It's about how she chooses to reclaim herself once she finally sees the cycle for what it is